Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Becca Orchardo, and I am the Channel Development Manager based here in DC for Rubrik, a cloud data management company. And I am so excited to introduce our speaker. Jo Miller is dedicated to helping women around the world become the powerhouse leaders they were meant to be. She delivers more than 70 presentations globally every year and has spoken in Europe, North America, Latin America, Asia Pacific, the Middle East, and of course on Zoom. Her book, which is titled Women of Influence, 9 Steps to Build Your Brand, Establish Your Legacy, and Thrive, was published by McGraw Hill in December. It was a #1 best-selling new release on Amazon and has sold 8,000 copies. Today, Jo will inspire us to become the fierce self-advocates and attract the advocacy of influential sponsors. She will also share an important life lesson learned from a puppy. Last November, Jo celebrated 3 years free from breast cancer. Jo believes that when life hands you lemons, you should stuff them in your bra and sing ta-da. Please help me give a very warm welcome to Jo Miller.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hello, everyone. Ta-da! Rebecca, thanks for that lovely, warm introduction. And look, I feel like I could just hire you to come to every session and introduce me every time I pop up on Zoom or walk in a room. And look, before we start, a couple things. Firstly, I have a poll available. I would love if you would all just go to pollev.com/leaderly and go ahead and take the poll. Very simple, just one question. Don't overthink it. Go ahead and click your response, and I'll share that data with you as we get a little further into the session. So again, pollev.com/leaderly to participate in our opening poll. And look, I want to start by thanking Rebecca, Deanna, Artie, the Women Transforming Technology organizing team, and our host VMware for making our time together possible. So could we just could you join me in a virtual round of applause for everyone who made our time together possible today? And then let's not forget you. I want to thank you for doing something that really we don't do frequently enough, which is that you've stepped away from everything you have going on with your busy home life and your work life. And yes, for so many of us, those have been smushed together. So you're dealing with so much on your plate right now. Life has become so much more chaotic and unpredictable than usual. And yet here you are, you've stepped away to dedicate this time to focus on yourself and your career and leadership development. So thanks for being here. And could you do this? This is going to seem a bit cheesy, but could you go ahead and raise your right hand? Go ahead and raise your right hand up nice and high. Thank you. Drop it down behind your shoulders and just give yourself a pat on the back for being here. And look, I really mean it from the heart. Thanks for dedicating this time to yourself, stepping away for the day to focus on a really important topic, which today is attracting the advocacy of those influential career sponsors, those influential advocates who can open more doors for us in our career than we ever thought possible. Now, look, but before I make a start, I know some of you who've not worked with me before have a question that I should probably answer straight up. You're wondering, where is her accent from? Right? Yes, you were. So like many of you, I'm not currently living and working in a place which is where I grew up. My story was that I grew up in Australia. I lived in the Bay Area in California for about a decade. Shout out to the folks introducing yourselves from the Bay Area and California. Then with my husband's career, we relocated to Cedar Rapids in Iowa. And hello to Julia, who's just joined from Cedar Rapids as well. So my journey's been Australia to California to Iowa. So look, the accent you hear today is Australifornia Iowan. Listen up, you might not hear another one of those anytime soon. And look, as the only Australian women's leadership expert in the entire state of Iowa, I think I have some unique qualifications to share with you. By the way, that's going to be probably the cutest slide in my deck today. So I have no concerns. I am totally qualified to be here with you today. All right, that's probably more than enough about me, right? So our topic today is attracting the advocacy of influential sponsors. And I want to share a story that I heard about a woman named Cindy who early on in her career, when she was just starting out as an engineer, realized that her current job was not her life's calling. So she started to look around internally within the organization to understand what might be a different role, a better suited one that she could move into. But she quickly ran into a brick wall, and that brick wall was a company policy. So her company had figured out that it was so intensive and so expensive to train new engineers that engineers like Cindy and her colleagues needed to stay in their roles for 5 years before they were eligible to move. But Cindy knew in her heart, she just couldn't do it. So around about that time, Cindy had been volunteering with an employee resource group when the group's sponsor, a vice president in a different part of the business, reached out and invited Cindy for lunch. And at lunch, he said, I've been observing you and I admire your commitment and your passion and the energy that you bring to all that you do. And the VP asked Cindy, what are your career aspirations? Well, Cindy had to think on her feet, but decided to open up and shared with the VP about her mismatched role, the brick wall she'd run into, and that company policy that was preventing her from moving into the ideal role that she aspired to be in. And the VP listened. Not long after that, things started to move, but behind the scenes in ways that were invisible to Cindy. And she later came to learn that that vice president had gone to Cindy's management and laid out a challenge and said, look, I would much rather that we drop our own policy, break our own rule, and move Cindy into her ideal role rather than risk losing her talent to another company that recognizes her potential. And looking back on that moment today, Cindy's identified that as the moment when her entire career trajectory changed. Now, in a moment, I'm going to tell you exactly where Cindy is today. But first, I want to tell another story. Another engineer, this time a software developer, who was part of the inspiration for me writing this book. And that all came from a conversation we had almost a decade ago where she said, I feel like I'm the best kept secret in my organization. She said, I feel like I'm the invisible employee. And what had happened was she'd become indispensable for doing the type of work that downplayed her potential. And by the way, being indispensable in your current role won't move your career forward. So she felt stuck, and she and I had a conversation to make an inventory of all of the raw leadership strengths and the very polished technical strengths she had that were going unseen and underleveraged. And she started to look for opportunities to use those strengths on a daily basis, volunteer for some high profile exposure opportunities to showcase those strengths, and build a personal brand around those strengths that previously had gone hidden. And so as time went by, she started to make her value visible and ultimately attracted that career advocate who was able to kick down a door and move her into her ideal role, and her career from there really took off. So ahead in our time together today, we're going to take a look at what is sponsorship and how does it work, and what are 6 steps for attracting your next influential career advocate, but also what are some ways to start to cultivate that open and transparent and equitable culture of sponsorship around you in the organization. But just because I'm always kind of curious to know, do you see a way there in the Zoom chat to click to raise your hand? If so, I want you to go ahead and click and raise your hand if this has ever been you. Have you ever felt like the best kept secret in the organization? Has that ever been you? Or type yes into the chat if that's easier. Has that ever been you? And look, I know how it goes. If you're concerned that your colleagues or your boss or your boss's boss's boss might be joining the session today, just kind of lean in close and blink your eyes twice, right? I think we've all been that person. We've all been the best kept secret in the organization. So look, my awareness of the concept of sponsorship really was ignited by a Harvard Business Review article that I read, where some authors of a study wrote that there's a special kind of relationship called sponsorship in which a mentor goes beyond giving feedback and advice and uses his or her influence with senior executives to advocate for the mentee. They said our interviews and surveys alike suggest that high potential women are over mentored but under sponsored relative to male peers, and that's one of the reasons that they're not advancing as rapidly in their organizations. And by the way, you'll see at the bottom of the screen, you can see why the article caught my attention. It's called Why Men Still Get More Promotions Than Women. So I want you to think about whether you might be one of those high potential women who are over mentored and under sponsored. And if so, you are definitely in the right session and in the right place. So one of my favorite leaders is Cindy Kent, who's on the board of directors with Best Buy. And I got a chance to interview her for my book on the topic of sponsorship. And when I asked Cindy, what is a sponsor? She said this. She said, a sponsor is someone who uses their internal political and social capital to move your career forward within an organization. And behind closed doors, they will argue your case. She actually went on to say a sponsor is someone who will pound their fist on the table on your behalf in those high-level closed-door meetings where you aren't there to represent yourself. They'll argue your case. They'll defend your talent and put your name forward. And by the way, if the name Cindy sounds at all familiar, she was that young engineer whose entire career trajectory set off on a different path with one sponsor's advocacy. And so she's a real proponent of the power of sponsorship to transform our careers. So after that moment with her sponsor's advocacy, she moved into her ideal role, a sales role, and then spent some time in HR. And from there went on to the business leadership track and rose through the ranks at some biotech companies to hold her top hands-on leadership role, which was as a GM with 3M. And by the way, if you know of a cooler job title than being a GM with 3M, I'd love to hear it. Unless you know someone who's ever been a CFO on a UFO, for example. I think Cindy wins. Anyway, a sponsor is someone who brings that internal political and social capital to help you advance and is like rocket fuel for your career, but in a good way. So I know that a question that many of you have is, what's the difference between a mentor and a sponsor? Because it's typically one of the most frequently asked questions in the sessions that I deliver. And so I've invited some panelists to join me on webcam and kind of play the role of workshop participant here, since most of us can't be meeting in the same room like we did back in the old days. And so I'm gonna call on first Monica Shen-Knotts. Are you there with us?
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Monica's joining us from Cisco. And Monica, I'd love to hear from you. So what's your perspective on what differentiates a mentor from a sponsor?
Sure. So just sharing what I think. A mentor is somebody who can give you advice and give you good guidance, maybe from their experience or from other things they've learned. But a sponsor is the person who's in a position who can raise you up to help you get that promotion or get you that connection to take the next step in your career.
I love that. Well said. It's the difference between providing advice and raising you up, taking you to your next career level. Thanks, Monica. And we're also joined by Nihal Mehta, who's joining us from Genesis. Nihal, are you there?
Hi, Joe.
Hi. So what's your take on the difference between a mentor and a sponsor?
Very similar. Again, a mentor is someone who coaches you, and doesn't necessarily have to be in your organization. In fact, it's good to have mentors outside your organization versus a sponsor who almost always is part of your organization. And sometimes the higher you go, for promotions, there have to be sponsors both within and outside your organization at the CX level who have to put your name in the hat or be that advocate. But if I could just, as we talk, Joe, expand on that a little bit, right? don't assume that your manager, senior manager, director, VP, SVP is automatically your sponsor. Again, just because in their organization, don't assume. Usually an organization, depending on the size, is given a few percentages of promotions a year. So don't assume that if that is, so first of all, don't assume they're your sponsor. Second, don't assume they know you and then your career aspirations, right? Again, how are they supposed to know it, right? And then, again, given the few sponsorships they have, it's not about always getting promoted. You might want that other stretched assignment, or you might, as you described in Cindy's case, want to be as part of that other group, right? And then also think, are you a sponsor for someone?
Thank you. Thanks. I just love that. And I'll add my own thoughts into the mix as well. So what's the difference between a mentor and a sponsor? Well, a mentor gives you perspective, where sponsors give you opportunities. Mentors talk with you while sponsors talk about you. A mentor helps you skill up, whereas a sponsor helps you move up. So perspective versus opportunities, talks with you versus talks about you, skill up versus move up. Is that fairly clear? Is everyone good now with the difference between mentors and sponsors? So look, having defined and differentiated between the two, I think it's worth pointing out that we utilize these two very valuable people in different ways during the course of our career. So early on, you're probably going to want to enlist the support of mentors for that feedback, that advice, to help you round out your weaknesses, build on your strengths. But then as you start to go toward more mid-career, mid-level, you'll switch from just enlisting mentors to diversifying who you seek out for mentorship. Internal, external, maybe there's a formal mentoring program or informal mentors you seek out. At the same time, something that we often overlook mid-career is to cultivate those peer-level advocates who can be our greatest supporters and champions. So we want to diversify who our mentors are, cultivate more peer advocacy, two-way relationships, become a mentor to others. But now's the time, as Nehal pointed out, the further we go and climb in our careers, the more vital it becomes that we attract sponsors. Then finally, at senior level, you've probably benefited quite a great deal from being mentored and sponsored yourself. So now it's time to turn around and pay it forward by being a mentor and a sponsor to others. And there's one final thing that you can do that I see getting overlooked quite frequently, which is to be someone who's championing and fostering an open and transparent, equitable culture of sponsorship in your organization. So look, I'd love for everyone who's listening in just to open up the chat and pinpoint, which career phase are you currently at, and depending on that one, which of these actions does it point you to? Is it early career, enlist mentors, mid-level, diversify mentorships, find your peer advocates, mentor others, attract sponsors? Or if you're more seasoned, is it to be that mentor and sponsor while cultivating that culture of sponsorship in the organization? And by the way, I'm just loving seeing your answers come in via the chat and seeing all the many different levels and career phases that are represented here within our group. Okay, so look, I know that the session is primarily about sponsorship, but I don't want anyone for a moment to think that mentors aren't an incredibly critical and valuable career resource. We're not going to talk so much about it today, but one of you's already asked where we can get the slides. Later in the session, I'll give you a way that you can get a link to get the slides, but I'll also provide this checklist of 40 questions that you can ask a mentor to make the most of any mentoring conversation, so that you never feel like the mentorship has run its course, or you find yourself scratching your head and wondering what the heck the two of you are going to talk about. So look out for that link a little later in the session. But let's turn back to sponsorship. And so a sponsor is, according to Amanda Martinez, someone with that seat at the decision-making table who will throw your name out for those coveted assignments or promotion opportunities. Look, a sponsor is someone who believes in you They see the potential in you that might be untapped or perhaps not even formed yet. So they see that potential that's untapped and unformed, and yet they're willing to place a bet on you. They're prepared to put their reputation on the line to advocate for you and to publicly support you. And it's someone who's in your corner and might provide some air cover so that you can take some career risks or be insulated against disruption in your organization. So it's that person who goes beyond giving feedback and advice, advocates for you, and uses their accumulated political and social capital to move your career forward. That person who can kick open more doors than you ever thought possible. And it's that person whose advocacy can completely transform the trajectory of your career for the better, of course. So what I'd love to hear from everyone who's joining is, have you had a sponsor? And if so, open up the chat, tell us in as few words as possible, how did that sponsorship begin? So how did the sponsorship ignite? And then what's one way that the sponsor helped you? What did they do to support you in your career? So have you had a sponsor? How did the sponsorship begin, and how did they help you? And while you're typing your answers into the chat, let's come back to Nihal for a moment, because Nihal, I know that you've been sponsored at different times and in different ways in your career. How did the sponsorship begin, and what did they do to help you?
Thanks, Joe. I'll pick one example, since this is particularly for women in technology. As I grew in my career, like many managers, directors, and VPs, I had a team in multiple cities in the United States and in India, right? And, had that whole thing going. And the work in my particular organization and function was growing. The company was growing, and my team and my function, quality assurance in specific, was growing. My direct team in India and my augmented staff in India had been recognized as a high performing team and had very low attrition. So in that sense, we had a lot going for us. And as I, grew in my life as well, my work-life integration enabled me to take on that next challenge, and I had wanted to. And with all that, and this example really involved my whole board of directors, where I had the informational powerhouse find out that our company was looking to open offices in China, the influencer who threw in my name in the hat, and then my senior leader sponsor who's like, yep, let it be Nehal who opens that first team in China. And then with that, I have visited Beijing and Chengdu many times, including the Panda base, loved it. And it was, just wonderful.
Hey, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And I know, Monica, you've had a different experience of being sponsored, but would you be so kind as to share with us? So how did sponsorship begin, and how did they help you?
So I was on a number of years ago, a cross-functional, cross-business team where we worked together on, these ideas of the future of collaboration, which is great since we're on a virtual meeting right now. And I met a number of different people that I kept in touch with. And sometime later, we were having a business meeting on something else. And after we got through all our action items, the VP who knew me from this panel before said, hey, how are you doing? And I said, well, I'm actually a little restless right now. And she's like, I know someone you should talk to, which are the wonderful words to hear. And she had seen my work and seen the quality of my work and how I was able to lead different teams. And what she did was she introduced me to another VP CTO in our company, and now I work for him. It led to my promotion to director. I'm now director of technology strategy in a totally different part of the business that would have never occurred to me to approach. This VP happens to be the husband of the person who recommended me, which is kind of cool, VP CTO power couple. But it was because she'd seen my work, and she was just really motivated to help find those connections and make people meet across the organization. So I really appreciate that sponsorship.
Thank you. Thanks. And I love, Monica, how your example is so different and distinct from Nihal's. And is Joanne White joined as a panelist? Joanne, are you there?
I am.
You're welcome. Great to see you, Joanne. And so I know you've also had a different example of sponsorship from your career too. So what was it? How did it start? And how did you benefit?
So thanks, Joe. The sponsorship that I have is with my current manager. It's actually better than any other that I've had, where he became my manager. They formed a new division and I was restless in my old role, but the new role has me doing work on a more expansive range of projects. And so he came in and saw the range of projects that I had, and he not only thanked me, but he sent me, I just sent this to you, Joe. He sent me a thank you card and actually wrote in it about how much everybody was pleased to see the amount of work that was being done. And when you're working remote, it's really hard to get that sort of feedback. But not only did he take the time to handwrite a card and send it to me, which gave me a good amount of confidence that he's done that, and I stuck that on my desk. But also he's gone into bat for me a number of times. And a lot of the time that might not be as visible to you as a mentoring relationship. But it certainly was when he recommended me for a promotion and used all of the work that I'd been doing as part of that. And in fact, came back to me and asked for more so that he could really evidence that to leadership. And he brings me into meetings that he thinks that I have expertise to bring, that he says to leaders that nobody else has. So it's really a very positive relationship to have that with a manager, where it gives me the confidence to reach out to him, to ask for additional help on anything. And when I do that, it's not because he might see me as being less than and incapable, but more as a sounding board. And I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Joe. And by the way, Joe's joining from Colorado, where she's with Willis Towers Watson. And you've got an amazing opportunity here to hear from not one, but two Australian Joes in the session today. It's like a random added benefit. But Joe, something that you said that stood out for me was, one thing you get is a confidence boost, but at the same time, sponsorship isn't always as visible to you because it sometimes takes place behind closed doors. And Joe, are you able to see my poll results up on screen? Is that visible?
Oh,
now?
yeah.
Great. Okay, so this is really interesting in that look at these numbers. It's quite stark. So 63% of you said, no, you've not had a sponsor. 19% said yes. 8% said yes, and I've sponsored someone else. And the 10% of you who said, what the heck is a sponsor? I hope I hope you've got a little more detail and information about what sponsorship is. But look, that's interesting. I see the numbers moving there a bit. I would say this is a little more skewed toward the no answer than typical groups I would benchmark against. And I think it points to something that Joanne White mentioned, which is sometimes sponsorship isn't visible to us. So I want you to rethink and reconsider, have there been times when your career had been moving with momentum and opportunities were opening up? Because chances are that there was someone, a sponsor, behind the scenes pulling strings, making that possible for you. And if so, if you suspect you have a sponsor, it might really be worth doing a little investigation, noticing who might be talking you up and putting you forward. Because if you do have a sponsor, it's kind of valuable to know that that's the case. And look, thanks everyone who sent your examples of sponsorship in via the chat. Deanna, was there anyone in particular, did you spot one as they came flying by that stood out for you that might be worth mentioning?
Hi, Joe. Yes, I really like this question. Does my manager need to know that I have a sponsor, and how do you navigate that kind of conversation?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yes. And so because Sponsorship is sometimes invisible to us. We're not always aware. Our manager is not always aware. And so I want you to think about the political landscape in your organization, and you'll know your organization best, and kind of the lay of the land in terms of the politics that might come into play, whether it's worthwhile bringing your manager into that awareness, into the loop, into the conversations. You may or may not choose to have your manager be aware, but if your career is moving with momentum, you absolutely want to get clear about who your sponsor is. Figure it out for yourself. So I know that many of you love data. Are you ready for some data? Here it comes. So leadership opportunities don't typically just trickle down through the layers of an organization. They are deliberately funneled via sponsorship. 4 US-based and global studies have clearly showed that it's sponsorship and not mentorship that's how power gets transferred in our corporate workplaces. Another favorite data point of mine, women who have sponsors are more likely to raise their hand for stretch assignments and to ask for raises, 22% more likely, in fact. And if I was to hazard a guess as to why this is so, I think it's because having a sponsor is a bit like a layer of protective bubble wrap around your career. You feel emboldened to take a few risks, to ask for something that you might not necessarily. So it's someone that provides you with some air cover to speak up and self-advocate and take risks. Women and men feel more satisfied with their career advancement when they have sponsors. Here's my favorite one that I want to bring your attention to. Ambitious women tend to underestimate the impact that a sponsor can have. So what do you think? Do we have any ambitious women in the session today? I think the answer is yes. So chances are collectively, you're underestimating the impact that a sponsor can really have on you and your career. Now, at the same time, you've probably guessed that opportunities to be sponsored aren't necessarily evenly or even equitably distributed across an organization. There are sponsorship gaps, and in particular, I'd love to have you guess what the male-female gender sponsorship gap is. So here's a pop quiz. In our corporate workplaces, and this is for white-collar US employees, what percentage of women do you think have sponsors? So we know that high potential women tend to be over-mentored and under-sponsored relative to male colleagues. Go ahead and open up the chat, type in your answer. I'm really curious. All right, Heather says 30%. Dimple said 15, and Kyle said 10. And we have like a whole range of answers from Anna Maria, who's a little more pessimistic, to Jeannie at 25%, who's a little more optimistic. Joanne White, do you want to weigh in and give it your best shot? So what percentage of women do you think have sponsors?
So I've thought about that since I spoke with you last, and originally, and some people have guessed the same as me. I said 25, 75. But I'm thinking back now, and especially because people already said how many they think are sponsored of themselves, that people may report something more like 15% for women and maybe 60% for men.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks. By the way, I accidentally messed up and sent the numbers to you in the slide deck before this session. So I'm going to just reveal the answer to everyone. So first up, what percentage of women? It's actually 13%. Is anyone surprised? Some of you guessed much lower, some of you guessed higher. So now the percentage of men, and you know, I see numbers like 40 and 85 and 50. Wow, Christine said men 100%. The answer might surprise all of you. It's actually 19%. So yes, there is a gender sponsorship gap between men and women. It's possibly not as pronounced as you might have thought. And by the way, I want to apologize with the data that I was able to support did not include non-binary and trans people. You might need to, once again, have your own guess as to what those numbers look like. There's not just a gender sponsorship gap. There is also, as you may have imagined, a race and ethnicity gap. And so despite having high levels of ambition and knowing that sponsorship is especially critical in igniting their career advancement, people of color are sponsored at a rate of 8%. And remarkably, given the fact that they're the group that has one of the highest rates of sponsoring others, Hispanic employees are the lowest of all in terms of having 5% sponsorship rate. So one of the things that we'll be addressing a bit later in our time together is how can we start to shift the culture, close those gender and race and ethnicity sponsorship gaps by being someone who's causing the ripple effects across the organization, making sponsorship a more open and transparent and equitable experience. So for now though, let's talk about you attracting your next great career sponsor. And I know many of you are on the edges of your seats wondering, okay, that sounds great. How do I get a sponsor? Hold on a moment. That's not quite how it works. Sponsorship is not something that you ask for typically. It's not like going and asking someone to be your mentor. Asking for it outright before you've earned the right might be a quite serious misstep. So sponsorship is always earned but rarely asked for. You don't choose the sponsor. Typically, the sponsor chooses you. And before I start to count down the 6 steps you can take to attract your next career sponsor, I want to answer the question from a number of you, which is where can I get the slides and materials? And so I've set up a text code. So send a text message to the number 33777 and type in the word influencer. Now, full disclosure, you will be signing up for my newsletter, so take note of the privacy policy at the bottom of the slide, and you can always unsubscribe. But you'll get the bonus materials like the 40 questions for a mentor and some others I'll mention later. You'll get the slides. But the thing that I'm really excited about is that the conference organizers have arranged for me to give away 30 Kindle copies of my book, so you'll be in the running for that. So text the word influencer to 33777. And actually, I wonder if one of the panelists or someone would be able to copy that text code 33777 and the word influencer into the chat so we can keep moving ahead. But it would be my absolute honor to hear from you. By the way, shout out to Jen Dawson, who said one of her sponsors, Donna Potter, one of my favorite leaders, already gifted Jen a copy of the book. Here's a fist bump with sparkles for you, and also one for Donna Potter. What a true sponsor indeed. All right, let's get back on target here. So I'm going to start counting down the 6 steps you can take to attract your next influential sponsor. Why am I counting down? Well, in the process of hiring a writing coach to develop my writing skills, my coach told me, if you're building up any kind of list, start at the high number and work your way back down to 1, because it builds up a sense of drama and anticipation. All right, so with all that in mind, are you ready? Are you ready for number 6? So the 6th step that you can take to increase your chances of earning sponsorship, attracting your next influential career advocate, is to learn how to spot the potential sponsors in your organization. So start to be on the lookout for who are those leaders that have the qualities that make them likely to be an effective sponsor. Before I tell you what my take is on this, I would love for everyone to open up the chat. Think about what qualities do you think would make someone an effective or even a truly great sponsor. So take to the chat, type in any qualities that you think will make someone an exceptional sponsor. While you're doing that, could we hear from you, Monica? So Monica, what do you see as being the qualities that make a good sponsor?
A good sponsor identifies talent, and I think they really enjoy identifying talent. That's something that's fun for them and rewarding.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. They kind of get some mojo from being that great talent spotter and talent scout. Joanne, do you have any thoughts on this? What qualities or characteristics does a sponsor need to bring?
Oh, good question. The sponsor needs to, of course, be somebody who's influential in the company and really wants to share the work that you do with others in a way that other leaders will listen to and respect that opinion. And it's funny that a good sponsor is someone who will engender a catching relationship with other leaders. Other leaders are interested in you and also will become your sponsor. It's like a network of sponsorship ultimately. So as the projects that you get to work on expand, so do your sponsorship network. And that's always really great because you're given the pick of the bunch that way.
That is great. I got this sense that when a sponsor speaks, it's kind of like catnip to other leaders. They kind of find it irresistible, that influence the sponsor brings. And then have we had Bushra Anjum join us as an on-camera participant? Bushra, are you with us? Are you in the Zoom session yet? Possibly have not unmuted yourself. No worries. Hopefully Bushra is able to join in a little while. We'll hear from her on another topic. But look, I see some terrific examples coming in via the chat just so rapidly. But Deanna, are you able to call out a couple qualities of a great sponsor that caught your eye as they came in?
Yes, I think the one that's I think the best is people who are a good listener and are able to connect that person's talents to opportunities in a meaningful way. So it's not just, blasting any opportunity. It's really making pointed, direct projects and opportunities available to that person, knowing their strengths and weaknesses.
Thank you. Thanks. I think that's really insightful. They listen, they understand your strengths, where you want to go, but are great at making that match. Yedna said the scope of their influence aligns with your goals. Someone else, Rebecca, said someone with a good reputation in the upper echelons, the C-level. And I love this answer from Angie too. Angie said someone who's a personal guide that can help kind of navigate through company politics. And then someone else, Nalini, has said someone who can see your potential and is able to highlight the gaps, but also match you to opportunities too. So, wow, thanks everyone. I wish I could have read all of your examples. I have 3 of my own to share, and it tracks very much with what we've heard so far. So it's someone who's a respected, influential talent spotter, respected in that you want to pay attention to who the leaders are around you in your organization or your industry as a whole who've earned the trust of their peers and superiors, and look out for those leaders whose values are in line with your own. Their values and ethics align with yours, but also with the organization, because ideally a sponsor is going to be someone who's widely respected, such that when they speak on your behalf, their recommendation is going to carry that weight, that credibility. Of course, influential as well, respected and influential. If sponsors are going to kick down walls, open doors for you and connect you with new opportunities, their word needs to carry authority. They must have that influence so they can make a persuasive case that it's worth other leaders taking a chance on you. And then finally, be a talent spotter. I think most importantly, and coming back to Monica's comments, a sponsor is someone who's willing to place a bet on untapped talent and as yet unproved potential. Someone earlier on in the chat said it's someone that has some vision and insight, and I think they're able to peer out into the future, kind of like a talent forecaster, and say, look, you might be here today, but here's where I see you going, and actually put their reputation on the line as they place that bet. So learn to spot the sponsors around you in your organization and ask yourself, who might be those leaders who bring these qualities? And then how can I invite them into my network? And look, I know when I say go network with leaders, I think for a lot of us, our first response is to go, right? And so think about ways that might be a little creative. You don't necessarily have to go up and introduce yourself to someone in the lunch line in the old days when we did this in person, or introduce yourself via LinkedIn or email. That's certainly one way. Think creatively though. Could you put together a presentation and invite leaders to come and see your presentation on something you've done or created, or sharing best practices? Or could you invite them to sponsor your employee resource group, or volunteer for an event or a cause that they're especially passionate about? So ask yourself, who are the leaders that have the qualities that potentially make them a good sponsor, but also how can you bring them into your network? All right, so counting down from number 6, learning to spot sponsors. Next up, bring something unique and special to the table. This one comes in at number 5. Sylvia Ann Hewlett literally wrote the book on sponsorship. She authored a book called Forget a Mentor, Find a Sponsor. And in it, she said that there are certain things that a sponsor looks to from you, because sponsorship isn't such a one-way street that we sometimes think it is. It's not all someone helping you. There's definitely something that's in it for the sponsor. And according to Sylvia Ann Hewlett, it is that the sponsor is someone that looks for your loyalty. So they want you to be loyal. They also look to you to deliver outstanding performance. So go above and beyond to deliver more than is asked of you in your role. But thirdly, and this is the one that really caught my attention, she said, you need to bring something unique and special, uniquely valuable to the table. And so to illustrate a certain point related to this, I'm going to share my favorite leadership video. This is called The World's Worst Sheepdog. It's my favorite leadership video. You know what a sheepdog is, right? It's a really smart, hardworking dog that partners with a farmer to move a flock of sheep from one location to another, to water, to food, or maybe to become food. Well, this little one is called Nelson. And when I first saw this video, someone posted on social media that this is what happens when you lie on your resume about having previous experience Nelson, as a sheepdog.
Nelson, here. Nelson, come here. Here. Nelson, come here.
All right, I think you get the point, right? And so why is this my favorite leadership video? Well, first up, I think what you saw is that he's being the type of leader that others want to follow, but he's also disrupted and redefined what it means to be a sheepdog, right? He's innovating, he's doing it in his own way. And I would say he's not necessarily the world's worst sheepdog. He has what it takes to potentially be one of the best. If he continues to lead in a way that entices others to follow, and if he can only figure out where the heck he's going, right? But the reason I love this so much is that there are going to be times when you bring leadership strengths that look very different from the leadership that's gone before you in your organization. You will bring leadership strengths that are different than the leaders around you and above you. And so I want to remind you that it's okay to disrupt and redefine what leadership looks like and embrace your own leadership strengths. You do you. That was a sheep joke there, by the way, if anyone caught it. You do you. Own and embrace your authentic leadership strengths. So it's about asking, what's your leadership superpower? My research partner, Selena Rosvani, interviewed hundreds of very senior level women leaders. And one of the things that she noticed is they did not get to where they are in their careers by hammering themselves on their weaknesses, by obsessing over their weaknesses, but rather they got where they are by identifying those strengths, turning their strengths into superpowers, and harnessing those to the benefit of their career. And look, there's never been a more important time in our lifetimes, in our collective history, to ask, who am I as a leader really? What is your authentic leadership style? What are your leadership strengths? What's your superpower? Because look, I think we can all agree the world needs our leadership now more so than ever before. And, if you think back to, say, even 2 short months ago, what your company and co-workers and customers and community and family need from you has changed. And newsflash, it's going to continue to change as this pandemic is unfolding and ongoing. So in our collective lifetimes, I don't think there's ever been a more important moment for leaders to adapt and flex and rise up to meet crises and lead change and fill leadership gaps head on. And this is not the time for a one-size-fits-all model of leadership. All right, so be thinking about your own leadership strengths. So back to step 5 and Sylvia Ann Hewlett's comment that what a sponsor looks to from you is that you bring something unique and special to the table. I like to call this your leadership brand, also known as your leadership superpower. It's what differentiates you. And it starts with knowing, firstly, what are your strengths? So what are your technical and professional capabilities and strengths, plus your leadership strengths? So what are the things you're good at or predisposed to become good at if you were to really focus on building those competencies? So what are your strengths? Next, what are your passions? And look, if we were doing this session at any time up until, say, maybe early March this year, I would have said you want to match your strengths to the things that you love to do, that you're passionate about, that light you up and inspire you. Well, look, I think our definition of passions has to change to meet the times. Right now, I want you to think about, what are you passionate in terms of, what are you deeply concerned about? Even what are you angry about? What do you care about? What is incredibly meaningful to you right now? What gets you fired up and want to take action and make a difference? So look, at any time in your career, I think it's easy for us to think about building a career around our strengths and our passions. But if we do that, if we ignore the third element, we might just have, instead of a thriving and sustainable, successful career, we might have an expensive hobby. So don't do that. I don't want that for you. You probably don't want that for you. That's where the third element comes into play to define your leadership brand, that unique value proposition that you have to offer, that sponsors want to know about. And it's to know, what is it that your organization and industry or customer base really needs and values from you, that if you were to provide that service to them, you would be solving a really important problem, or filling a leadership gap, or driving much needed change. So what is it that you have to offer that your organization or industry or customers, or even the world as a whole, really needs and wants and values? But look, if you put the 3 together, right there in the middle of the Venn diagram where all 3 overlap, that's what you want to build your brand around. That's your leadership superpower. That's what your organization and your sponsors really need from you, that you bring to the table something that plays to your strengths, that fuels your passions, that's meaningful, that you care about, but also where you're providing something that is really needed and valued. And look, what the world needs from us has changed dramatically in the past month or so as well. So if you knew what this brand was in the past, you might want to revisit this concept now, think it through and ask, now that our world has changed so dramatically, is there a leadership gap for me to fill? Or is there a much needed change that I can drive? Or is there a problem that's opened up that I could be the one to address and solve? So I think it's a great time to rethink this model, this leadership brand. And I know coming up with the answer to what this is in 2 minutes in a Zoom workshop is a lot to ask. Some of you need more time, like, for example, another 3 years. Does anyone need another 3 years? But look, if there's one thing you take away from this session that can be truly career enhancing, it's to figure out what this is for yourself. If you are managing people or leading teams, and you already know yours, think about helping others connect with their leadership brand. And if you're leading large organizations, you always want to steer your organization into a place where their strengths meet their passions and also bring something that's of great value. As Dr. Rohini Anand likes to say, be authentic about your own leadership style. Don't fight to try and change it, but own it, communicate it, put a brand on it, and put a value on it. So don't be shy about letting people know what you bring to the table that is truly unique and special. All right, so we're counting down, and coming in at number 4 is to raise your hand for exposure opportunities, right? To create the types of career defining moments that put you and your technical and leadership strengths firmly on the map, that have people sit up and pay attention and see the leader in you. So raise your hand for those high profile, high exposure roles or projects or assignments that are going to make your value visible to your next potential sponsor. Because one thing I've heard again and again among the women that I speak to is that sponsorship often ignites when a leader who is a sponsor sees you in action and sees the value of the work you do and decides to advocate for you. Here's what not to do. Don't become indispensable for doing the type of work that downplays your potential, right? And here's a real watch out. Here's the opposite of the work that is high profile and puts you on the map. There was a number of studies done about 2 years ago that found that women and minorities get asked to do more of the office housework. Have you heard that term? You can probably guess what it means. Office housework, right? It's the low profile, low visibility stuff, the little things, the busy work. Well, no one's career moved forward on the strength of doing office housework. If you can think of an example, go ahead and type it into the chat. In the old days when we all went into offices, it could literally be the office housework, being the one to tidy up the break room, or maybe it looks like being the one to gather RSVPs for team meetings. Oh, wow. Archie said organizing the birthday cakes. Some of you have said, yes, and heck yeah, I've been there. Oh, Meredith said taking notes for the team. Christy said the greeting cards, bringing the cake. We have ordering food, running meetings. And look, wow, I see so many great examples. Watch, listen, and take note to the examples coming through the chat right now. And just remember, no one's career rose to the next level because they were a ninja at changing the coffee filters in the break room. Instead, what I want you to do is to create the antidote, the opposite to office housework, which is create career defining moments. And oh, by the way, if you see office housework being disseminated in an inequitable way in your team, be a stand for that. It's distributed equally. It's stuff that needs to be done. It just shouldn't fall on the shoulders of the minority. Instead, what I want you to do is create career-defining moments, the moments of real achievement that put you and your strengths and your leadership brand firmly on the map, that spotlight you and what you're capable of, right? So I have a couple rules of thumb here, a couple steps to take to create these career-defining moments. And I think the first step you're going to appreciate. Here you go. Here it comes. The first step to creating career-defining moments is to work less. Yes, you heard right, work less. Now, don't anyone leave the Zoom right now. At this point, because what I don't want to have happen is that, you know, you resume work and when your boss said, what did you learn at the Women Transforming Technology conference? Don't say, well, you know, Joe Miller said I should work less. Don't say that, you'll get us both in trouble. What I mean is work less on the little things, the minutia, the busy work, the office housework, the task stuff, as opposed to the bigger picture, more strategic, high impact stuff that can really put you on the map. Because look, if you are a hard worker and you develop a reputation for hard work, what do you think you attract more of? You'd be right if you just said more work, not necessarily the stuff that really makes you visible. So work less on the lower level, busy work, the office housework, so that you can work hard on those career defining moments. And by the way, I mentioned I'm from Australia. My mum has a saying that is perfect for this situation. So think about it. When you have your head down and you are working hard, you have your nose to the grindstone, right? My mum would say that you have your head down and your tail up. So think about that for a moment. When you have your head down and your tail up, which part of you is most visible? Possibly not your best asset. Am I right? So work less on the little things and the busy work, and instead work hard on the right initiatives, the ones that could create career defining moments for you. Now, when I say work hard on the right initiatives, I would love if some of you take it to the chat and just tell me, what are some of those right initiatives that you might want to focus much more on? Give your top priority. What are those right projects, roles, and initiatives that could create that career defining moment? Shiny Shaw has said what your managers care about. Yes, what's important to them. Christine said for her, it's creating the global operating platform. Shreyani said something strategic. I love that. And Angie said also the strategic stuff, but the operational approach as well. Diana just said one word: pain points, right? The pain points of your team, your organization. And Heather has said solving a problem that no one's been able to solve. So look for, as Christina said, the high visibility, quick wins, the big picture stuff. Melina said strategic and disruptive. I'm going to say all of the above. You've got it. So think about what that looks like for you right now. Have you been working hard on the right initiatives, those career defining moments? I'll share 2 criteria. They are the things that, number one, align with your leadership brand and showcase it. And secondly, they're the ones that show you can deliver valuable results to the bottom line of your organization. So next time you get a chance to choose what you work on, say yes to the stuff that showcases your brand and shows that you can deliver those valuable big picture strategic results. Great comment from Melina just came in. She likes to pause every morning and off the to-do list, look at which one is going to be most impactful for the next 8 hours. So keep steering towards those career defining moments. All right, so think about whether you've got one you're currently working on that you might want to give the highest priority to, or whether there's something that you can raise your hand for. Because look, if I was to say, what does it take to stretch? right? What are the things you can work on that stretch you and your skills and stretch the organization's view of you? Well, it's kind of the same answer to if I asked all of you to stand up right now and stretch, right? One of the first things you would do is raise your hand, okay? So don't forget to raise your hand, ask for the opportunities you want, and create more of those career defining moments. So step 5 is to raise your hand for those exposure opportunities. So we're counting down, and now, oh, sorry, that was step 4. Step 4 was to raise your hand. Step 3 now is to make your value visible, because your company won't know how to leverage you as a resource if the organization doesn't have insight into what your unique talents and accomplishments are. So there's nothing untoward about being honest about what you do well. Your company won't appreciate how to tap you as a resource if you've not made your value visible. One of my favorite women in tech leaders is Nora Denzel, a board director with AMD and Ericsson. And she said, it's not what you know, and it's not who you know, it's who knows what you know, right? Do you like that? It's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows what you know. So think about that. Who knows what you know? Are people aware of the specialist knowledge and expertise you bring? Do they know about your career defining accomplishments? If not, you have some work to do. And look, we're talking about not being the best kept secret in the organization and making your value visible. And this is backed up with research, in that one survey of 240 Silicon Valley leaders found that they said the most common factor, the number one factor that helped them advance to where they are today is visibility. Another study from Catalyst found that making one's accomplishments visible is the only career advancement technique or tactic that's associated with raises, right? So you've got to make your value visible. It's who knows what you know. So what I'd like for you all to do right now is to think about one of your career defining moments. So think about one of your proudest career or leadership achievements. I'm going to talk about why this thing about showcasing our accomplishments is often so hard. But first, I'd love for everyone to think and have in mind, what was one of your proudest moments, career or leadership achievements? I'll ask my on-cam panelists to do the same, and everyone go ahead and stand up, right? Because we're going to do a mindset shift here. Stand up, think about that proudest career or leadership achievement, and now stand with your feet shoulder width apart, hands on hips, feet shoulder width apart, hands on hips, chin up, shoulders back. And now think about that proudest career or leadership achievement. And I want you to imagine you're about to show up to a meeting where you know there's going to be a prime opportunity to showcase and speak up and talk up that proud career or leadership achievement. But as you're approaching that moment, guess what happens? Our big, beautiful brain kicks in and starts to subtly undermine ourselves. And you think to yourself, oh, wow, I don't want to sound too braggy. All right, everyone following along now, take those feet that are shoulder width apart and turn them in pigeon-toed. Next, you say to yourself, I don't want to come across as boastful. Drop your hands from your hips to your sides. Now you say to yourself, I know how busy everyone is. I feel guilty taking up their time. Drop your chin down to your chest. Now think to yourself, I feel uncomfortable talking about myself and my accomplishments. Hunch your shoulders further forward. Sometimes it's hard to toot my own horn. Go ahead and fold your arms. And then finally, I hate the feeling I'm pitching myself. Go ahead and crunch forward into a little ball. These are all of the ways that we diminish ourselves and make ourselves small. Now, from this hunched over troll-like posture, I want you to go ahead and speak your proudest career or leadership achievement. I'll go first. I wrote a book that sold 8,000 copies. All right, Monica, I see you there doing the same. Why don't you go ahead and speak your most proud career or leadership achievement from that posture?
Sorry, I can't like sit behind my chair on camera. I negotiated a unified user interface across 3 code bases.
All right, kind of loses a little power when we state it from this posture, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
Right. Is Bushra Anjum there with us? Bushra, are you on? No worries, can't find you there. What about you, Joe White?
I'm going to get my my mouse while I'm down here. Mine is to put the letters PhD after my name on my work signature.
Wow, by the way. All right, everyone, you get that this is completely ridiculous, right? So stand up, shake off that energy, and we are going to go from this mindset of diminishing ourselves and downplaying our greatness to refuting each of those objections to promoting accomplishments, which, by the way, are relatable because they've come from groups exactly like this one. So I'm going to go through one by one and refute them all. But first, stand again with your feet shoulder width apart, hands on hips, chin up, shoulders back, chest out, and think about that proudest career achievement. And when your big, beautiful brain says, I don't like to sound too braggy, or I don't want to come across as boastful, well, guess what? It's not bragging if it's true, is it? Next, we think to ourselves, I know how busy everyone is and I feel guilty taking up their time. Well, guess what? Everyone is busy. And leaders and sponsors often need to make critical staffing and team decisions on the fly at a moment's notice. And if they know what you've accomplished and what you're capable of, you just made their life so much easier. All right, next up, I am uncomfortable talking about myself. Sometimes it's hard to toot our own horn. Well, guess what? It gets easier with practice, doesn't it? Final one, I hate the feeling I'm pitching myself. Look, I just have 2 words here. Pitch, please. Okay, so from that proud posture, now go ahead and speak your most proud moment, your proud career or leadership achievement. Joe White, you want to go first?
I just put myself back on mute. I now put my letters PhD after my name on my work signature.
Feels good, doesn't it? Monica, how about you?
I negotiated a unified user interface across 3 code bases.
Hey, awesome. And look, fist bumps and sparkles to everyone at home who just did the exercise. Here's the net of it. Don't make yourself small. Don't diminish your achievements. Stand tall, stand proud, speak up, have a voice, and don't be afraid to showcase your achievements. Because look, we often get so focused on trying to fix or cover for our weaknesses that we forget to celebrate our strengths. So I have one rule of thumb here for when to know is the right moment to showcase your accomplishments. And by the way, speaking up like that in a meeting is probably one of the toughest places to do it. But here's how to know the right achievements to share. And it starts with A. What does it spell? No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't spell anything. It's an awfully astute acronym like that. It stands for amplify the accomplishments that align with your aspirations. Amplify the accomplishments that align with your aspirations. So, next time you get a chance to talk up something you've accomplished or showcase an achievement, don't think about every little thing that you've done. Be strategic and choose those career-defining moments that align with your most important career and leadership goals, and amplify the accomplishments that align with your aspirations, right? A. So when you do this well, you get to go, hey. All right, that was cheesy. I'll give you that. So amplify the accomplishments that align with your aspirations to put you and your value and accomplishments clearly on the map. Now, as I said, kind of speaking up and saying, I created this achievement in a meeting is one of the most awkward ways to do this. So one of the things I've done is make available 33 ways to amplify your accomplishments. But here's another great rule of thumb. If you can educate others as you share your achievements, well, it certainly feels good, but it makes you all the more memorable because people love and appreciate learning from you. So if you're joining as a participant, go ahead and type into the chat, what's one thing you could do to amplify your accomplishments? And if you're stuck, know that on that link I gave you, and we'll give you again, there will be a place where you can download this list, this checklist of things with a bias toward doing things that educate others, like writing an article for a blog or sharing best practices, right? So amplify your accomplishments, storytelling, as Anita just said. All right, so we're getting close to the end. Are you ready for step number 2 in our 6 steps for attracting the advocacy of influential sponsors? By the way, this is Rocket Dog here. And it's to have clear, courageous career goals. Have clear, courageous career goals. Because look, if you are identifying and owning your leadership strengths unapologetically, if you're making your leadership brand and your accomplishments visible, if you're creating career-defining moments and amplifying those achievements, well, you've formed a strong foundation to be bold and courageous in what you go after as your career goals. So have those clear, courageous career goals is step number 2 in attracting your next influential sponsor. So look, we've counted down from number 6, which is learn to spot sponsors. Number 5, bring something unique and special to the table. Number 4, raise your hand for exposure opportunities. Number 3, make your value visible. And number 2, have clear, courageous career goals. Are you ready for the number 1 step you can take to attract an influential sponsor? Are you ready for the one I call the grandmother of them all? Can you feel the drama and anticipation? The number 1 step is, and first I'm going to tell you a quick story. So I was coaching a woman who had taken a big step down in her career to go work for an organization that she knew she wanted to spend the rest of her working life with. But as you can imagine, when she took that step down, after about 9 months, she was beyond feeling bored and underutilized, and wondered why she wasn't attracting that next opportunity. So she and I got to talking, and I said, well, are you clear what your goal is? And she said, yeah, I want to lead another transformational change initiative. And then I asked, well, do your leaders know that? And she couldn't honestly say that they did. And so we practiced and role played what she could say at appropriate moments in conversations to share those goals with her leaders. So she practiced saying, I feel like I've mastered my current role, and what I'd like to do next is lead another transformational change initiative. So we practiced and role played, and we left our call, and then a little later in the day, one of her leaders stopped by to say hi and check in on progress on something. And just as he turned to leave, she said, oh, wait, there's one more thing. And she felt her heart beating in her chest and a knot in her stomach, but she managed to say, look, I feel like I've mastered my role. And what I'm interested in doing next is leading a transformational change initiative. And he turned to go like it hadn't really sunk in. But 15 minutes later, he was back and he said, I think I have just the opportunity for you. So I can't promise it's going to happen that quickly, but when we talk about the number 1 step you can take to attract those influential sponsors is to take those clear, courageous career goals and share them with your leaders, because they're often tasked with making critical business and staffing and teaming decisions rapidly on the fly. And if you've educated and re-educated them about what you want for yourself, as well as making your unique value visible, you might just make a leader's life a whole lot easier, turn that manager or mentor into a sponsor when they make that match. So let's take a quick review of the steps. In fact, as we do this, I'm just going to go ahead and open up my next poll for you. All right, I think that's live now. So go back to pollev.com/leaderly one more time, and you'll see that there's a picture there with each of the 6 steps. Go and drop a pin on the map with whichever one of these steps is going to be yours to work on. Is it to learn to identify potential sponsors, figure out that leadership brand, that thing you bring to the table that's so unique and special, raise your hand for exposure opportunities to create career-defining moments, make your value visible and amplify your accomplishments? Is it to have clear, courageous career goals, or to share those goals with your leaders? Someone asked to see the link again. Let me just go back a slide. Here we go, pollev.com/leaderly. And I see them on my other screen coming in, pollev.com/leaderly. But let's check in with our panelists. Nihal, Meta, are you still there with us? Nihal, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am, Joe.
So tell us of these 6 steps, which one is yours to focus on and work on?
Gosh, you gave us such good information. I love the 4 A's and courageous career goals. So maybe I'll answer this in a different way, right? Sometimes it's also knowing your goals. So for the longest time, Joe, I had wanted to have a more customer-facing role after years of engineering. And I was presented with the opportunity to do a role in partner sales. And, you know, they approach it very subtly. And this is how I responded. And like, sales, you know, I don't play golf. I don't drink coffee much. I don't eat meat. That steak dinner is completely lost on me. 3 strikes, I'm out. I guess I'm not the right person. Let me recommend some folks to you. And you know, to my credit, these were my sponsors. They knew my abilities. They knew my desire. And they came back to me in a couple of days saying, good, you'll get some work done. When are you ready to start? So a lot of it is about knowing those were my goals. I didn't know that translated into sales or alliances or something else.
I love that. Thank you. Thanks. And Nihal, can everyone see the map with the pens dropping up on the screen at pollev.com/leaderly? Is that up on the screen for you now? Great. All right. Hey, thanks everyone for taking the poll. And it's great to see that the answers are, you know, pretty much all over the map right now too. And so think about what you'll work on, put something on your personal action plan. And let me go back to my slides now. Did I mention I'm kind of a Zoom newbie, which we'll call a Zoobie. So I've been doing my best here to, to navigate switching screens, because I wanted to finish with talking about what we all can do to close the sponsorship gap, to foster a culture of sponsorship that is more open and equitable and transparent. And look, one of the best ways to learn how sponsorship works is to sponsor someone else, but it's also a great way to have an impact on the culture around you, because people who've been sponsored pay it forward. People who have had a sponsor are more committed and engaged leaders, and they tend to, those that they sponsor also in turn become more engaged and committed leaders, and diverse employees pay it forward by sponsoring other diverse talents. So if you want to shift the culture around sponsorship to have it be more open, equitable, and transparent, you can drop a pebble into the water by sponsoring someone else, knowing that the ripples can be quite far reaching, because sponsorship begets sponsorship. As Millette Granville has said, a sponsor doesn't need to be an executive, but they do need to have influence. And newsflash, we all have influence. but the chances are you're leaving influence on the table and not necessarily using your own political and social capital to the full extent you could to sponsor others. Now, often we think that sponsorship needs to be a grand gesture, like giving someone that assignment or promotion or creating a role for them. And it's certainly great to do that if you have that scope of influence. But if you don't, think about a concept called micro-sponsorship, meaning sponsorship that takes place in little moments that can be like the drop of water on the stone that over time makes a real difference. So think about what you could do to sponsor someone else. Micro-sponsorship can look like, when someone shares a great idea but no one hears, amplify, repeat that idea, and make sure that the person's name is forever attached to that innovation. Or it might mean calling out the talent that's going unseen in a colleague. It might be as simple as, when you see someone be talked over, say, let her finish. Or when someone offers you a stretch assignment that's just an awful fit for you and your aspirations, think about who you could refer that opportunity to, for whom it would be a great next step in their career. So look, when it comes to closing the sponsorship gap, shifting the culture, if you have the influence to throw someone their promotion, their assignment, please do so. Think about using your executive leadership power, if you have it, to talk about what sponsorship is, to educate other leaders about how it can be made unbiased and transparent, and be clear about what it would take for you to sponsor others. But if you don't yet have that scope of influence, use the influence you do have in micro-sponsorship ways to make an impact for someone else in their career. So I would love if everyone would open up the chat, type in one thing, one action you're going to take in order to pay it forward and sponsor someone else. So what's one action you'll take to be a sponsor to another person? I know you're all thinking I haven't seen any come in via the chat just yet, but our time is almost at a close. Just a quick reminder, if you want to get those checklists of 40 questions for a mentor and amplifying accomplishments, slides, materials, and win one of those 30 copies of my book, text Influencer to 33777, and I'd be honored to stay in touch. But look, final couple closing thoughts. Your work doesn't speak for itself. When you keep your head down, you silence your voice and you submerge your influence. And look, the world needs your leadership right now, more so than ever before in our collective lifetimes. So look, don't be shy. Own your superpowers. Raise your hand. Make your value visible. Amplify your accomplishments and the accomplishments of others, and make sure you're lifting up others as you rise and become that powerhouse leader that you were meant to be. So I'm going to thank Deanna and Artie and the entire team at VMware for making our time together possible, as well as Nehal, Joanne, and Monica, who joined to be our on-camera participants, and of course, everyone that stepped away from everything you have going on in our incredibly chaotic and unpredictable life right now to invest this time in yourself. Final closing thought. If you want to leave a lasting leadership legacy that long outlives your own lifetime, don't just be a leader, and don't just be a leader who develops other leaders. What I want you to be is an L to the power of 3, right? What's an L to the power of 3? Well, it's a leader who develops leaders who develop other leaders. Do you like that? Are you with me? If you're in, go to the chat and type in L, yes. Or if you've joined in person as a panelist, repeat after me, L, yes.
L, yes.
Hey, what's more with feeling, everyone? Chat it in person, L, yes.
L, yes.
Look, thanks so much, everyone, for joining me for the session. And again, such gratitude for the team at VMware and Women Transforming Technology for making our time together possible. Let's hope that the day is going to come when we can all get together and do this again in person. But look, can I ask everyone to do one more thing for me? Go ahead and raise your right hand, drop it down behind your shoulders, and give yourself a pat on the back, and let's all do a collective fist bump with sparkles to the webcam there. Thanks everyone for joining this session. It's been such an honor and a pleasure to work with you and learn with you. Fist bumps and sparkles. Be safe and take care. Thanks everyone.